So, good afternoon. We're going to start on time because there's plenty things to discuss. So, welcome to the Building Infrastructures and Scaling Up, Data Sharing on a Global Scale. My name is Hilary Hanahoe, and I have the great pleasure and honour of being the Secretary General of the Research Data Alliance, and I'm your moderator for this session. I would like to introduce first my panel. After I do the introductions, each of the panel members are going to give you maximum 5 minutes of the context in which they come to the panel today. And then we have some questions, which we have discussed. But of course, you're also welcome. Let's see how we go with the time. Okay? So from the end, I would like to introduce the data manager on our panel today, who is Leo Chile-Owen, who is the data manager for the South African Environmental Observation Network. Then we have the scientist, Leslie Wyborn from the Australian National University, honorary professor. Then we have the representative of the research infrastructure, Nigel Smith, who's the executive director and CEO of Triumph, which is the Canada's Particle Accelerator Centre. And last but not least, Inmaculada Figueira, who is from the Ministry of Science, Innovation and Universities of Spain, and she's the Deputy Director General for International Consortia, Organisations and Research Infrastructures. And she's the policymaker. Yeah, would that be right? Funder, policymaker, do you like that label? Okay, so I would like to say that we've been working on the programme committee to prepare all the different panels for many months now, and Leo and Leslie very kindly accepted the invitation sometime in advance. Full disclaimer that both Nigel and Inma accepted the invitation in the last 24 hours, as the other panellists were unable to join us at the last minute. So I'm grateful to all four of you, but particularly grateful for accepting to speak at the last minute. So I'm going to start off now. I see how forwards this way. Oh, very good. So this session is going to examine three areas around scaling data infrastructures. The economies and challenges of scale, the interoperability aspect, and of course the potential impact of AI. So I will first ask Leo to come up and give us his 5 minutes on the perspective and the context from which you come. And do be careful here on the... Thank you.
Good afternoon, all. So I'm coming to present in the context of a data infrastructure. So I'm from the South African Environmental Observation Network. This is the first time I open a presentation with a map, but this map shows the distribution of long-term research sites for SAON. I chose it because I think it highlights the diversity of data that we look after, and it will touch on the problems and complexities across all three of the areas that we'll be addressing today. So the first part is that we have to collect observations around the marine space and terrestrial sciences, although it's all environmental sciences, but when you start looking at the subdomains, you end up with heterogeneous data. So that's the first complexity that we have to deal with in regards to how do we then scale our activities to a global level. So with this, we find that it's not possible to actually implement a universal solution to data management because you're dealing with interdisciplinary data. So, and the other thing that I wanted to highlight, although we collect data ourselves, wherever we try to bring in partners, there are difficulties around data policy alignment issues. So that adds to another barrier with regards to trying to centralize data management activities in our context. And the final thing, of course, is that open access to data in a decision-ready format is really essential to make decisions about global change. So hence the emphasis would be on quality becomes an important issue. So what we've taken at the South African Environmental Observation Network is developing a system of systems approach to data management, because these solutions cannot be universal, so it has to be tailor-made for a specific domain. So with this approach, what we do is focus on metadata integration from the various domains, and then from there, develop data products downstream. And then with regards to bringing in additional institutions on board, what we really focus on is trying to harvest metadata from other infrastructures as opposed to hosting, because we are an institutional infrastructure, and unfortunately we don't have the investment to take on board everybody's data, but we do prioritize hosting services for partners without infrastructure. So it brings the second area that we'll touch on, which is interoperability. So with this in mind, what we look at is start at the global levels. What are the institutions, which institutions are managing data that's specific to our domain? There we have the Group on Earth Observations, and then there's ODIS, the Ocean Data Information System. It's aligned with IOD, and then the Ocean Biodiversity Information System. So we develop standards that align with these institutions with a view of integrating directly with them. And then these activities also cascade down to a regional level. So for example, with GEO, you have AfriGeo, and then within the country context, there's SAGEO, the South African GEO, where we discuss issues of data integration. Same with OBIS, there's AfroBIS, and yeah. And then the last part is that on the impact of AI, our organization was really unprepared to take advantage of the advancements in AI initially. But what we recognize is that our biggest strength lies on data mobilization. So we've partnered up with an organization called Zindi. What they do is mobilize data science resources in Africa. We mobilize data sets for them. They mobilize a network of data scientists. So it's thousands of data scientists that could potentially look at an issue. And they throw competitions around our data that we collect. And then whatever results come back from those competitions, they feed them back to us so that we can develop enhanced data products downstream. So these are the types of opportunities that AI has created in our space. And this is a good partnership because it's where it shows that there could be collaborations with the private sector where there's no exchange of finances whatsoever. So, but it's basically just leveraging each other's strengths. I'll end it there for now because only 5 minutes.
Excellent. Oh, thank you, Leo, and thanks so much for staying within the 5 minutes. We will go more into those topics afterwards now. Leslie, if you'd like to tell us your perspective from, and we press the big green button to move on.
Okay, so I'm a scientist, and when I started my career, there was no internet, and there wasn't even a thing called Excel. It was all pen and paper. But as it became digital, I was always the one that was trying to put together bigger and bigger data sets to look for patterns, and I got to the stage where my organisation said, oh, we'd rather you work in data than science. And so I've been building data, and when I say data, I mean data, scientific content databases for about 40 years now. And we keep going and over as new things come in, and we try and build new infrastructures. And I think it's time we started to learn from history. You know, the saying that if you don't learn from history, you're going to keep repeating the same mistakes. So I found this wonderful paper here by Wittenberg and Strawn about common patterns in how people build infrastructures, how they fail, how they succeed, and how the comparison between the Industrial Revolution and also how that applies to data today. And so the top two ones, you know, that great one when we're travelling, oh my God, I've gone to Europe with my American plugs, what did I do? Anyway. But anyway, we all know the experience of taking the wrong power sockets when we travel. And the bottom one is the railway gauges. And the things I learned from that is that gradually, as Wittenberg and Strawn pointed out, you have a vision and you have a new idea. And if you want to get something stable, then do it at the start before everybody else is involved. And then the more people get involved, it goes crazy because everyone's system is better than their system. And yes, there is a standard, it's mine, just change your stuff to mine, you know, that argument. But then if we want to move forward, we've got to bring it together and work these standardisations. So from the power sockets and the railways, we learn you're never going to get one, but you don't want 3,000, which was what we've got in a lot of data systems today. You need to bring it down. I think the other one from the bottom is the printing press. And you may not know this bit of trivia, but the first printing press was 36 AD. But it never really took off till the first dictionary, you know, nearly 150 years later. And the first English dictionary was 1755. Gee, they were a bit slow, weren't they? But the important point is that for the power of the words that you could use for printing, that is all the people that could read. And this is what's happening with our scientific data today. We have too many systems, too much differences, and it makes it very hard for us to address those global scientific challenges because we're in this quagmire of trying to sort out our data. So the topic of this is, you know, scaling. Okay, so I'd like to do it from two angles. It worked. Okay, so for those of you who don't know me, I wear many hats and I work on long-tail geochemistry data and also work on geophysics, which is HPC. And we've been able to scale our infrastructures up from our desktops through to our HPCs, and we're now up to exascale. And we must be able to be putting something on these things because we wouldn't keep growing them. But when you look at what they're doing, a lot of them are doing what we call physics-based modelling. But the newer computers have fantastic power at getting high resolution observational data. It's what we call the data intensive science period. And we're kind of getting nowhere because people don't speak within their scientific domain a common language, let alone speaking cross domains, the common languages. Now, I've got the dreaded red line here. And the important thing is the groups that are above it, because they actually show that a global community can get together, develop standards on their scientific content, their vocabularies, that enable them to do machine readability. And I'm referring to the Global Seismograph Network, the Earth Systems Grid Federation, the Massive Climate Group, GBIF, bless their socks, the crystallographers. Now, they're sort of a small, long-tail community, but they got their act together 30 years ago when journals went digital, and they said anyone who submits a paper will put their crystallographic data in this framework. Good on you. Wish the rest of the world had done it. And then, of course, there's IUPAC, the Pure and Applied Chemists, because they're standardising. And that, to me, is the clue, is whether or not you've got a global network. If we're going to start to get our global standards going like we did with the anatomy of the screw, have a look at all the details that make up a standard of a screw. And so this is what we've got to do with all our words. And the ones below the line, I've just got two that are close to me. One on the left is the International Union of Geodesy and Geophysics, and they have about 8 associations. Do you think they could actually standardise across geophysics, across seismology and magnetotellurics and that, units of measure, geography, time? Our supercomputers will enable us to do multi-physics analysis. We don't just have to stick within seismology or do dual analyses between, say, seismology and gravity. We can do the lot. Or we could. But we've got to get those, as I said, exact words sorted out. But there's a union there, and I think they're going to make it. And then there's my beloved group, which I can absolutely pay out and say, you idiot, sorry, you're not quite doing it the right way. That's the geochemists. And the geochemists, geochemical data is looked after by 5 science unions and 40 associations and societies. We've got a long way to go before we can get that international community that will help us as scientists to standardise those dictionaries and the vocabularies. And he's hoping it doesn't take us 200 years the way it did when we went from the printing press to being able to transmit and share our work and our language. Thank you.
Thank you, yeah, that's it. Thank you, Leslie. Right, I'm going to hand over to you, Nigel. You're going to tell us about Triumph.
So I'm the guy with the orange lanyard, because I accepted this offer about 12 hours ago, so heavily prepared.
Oh, so black means we speak.
Yeah, we've got to work out what the black actually means. So Triumph is Canada's Particle Accelerator Centre. What's shown here is one of the main halls that we have. The yellow is just painted lead. It's the shielding for the Accelerator Centre. We're basically a hub of multidisciplinary research, and I'll show you some of the research that we're doing at the moment in the next slide. But we operate at the interface between academia, government, and industry, and I think that brings a whole set of issues in terms of data when we're looking at the various stakeholders that we work with. They all have very different approaches. We have to accommodate some of the aspects, especially with industrial work, where you're trying to work within an NDA, but also ensure that the researchers that you're working with are not bleeding information across boundaries within the organisation. So we have a suite of particle accelerator centres. We have the world's largest cyclotron. For those who saw the Oppenheimer film, when Ernst Lawrence is the guy that developed the cyclotron in the 30s, there is a pub quiz question there, because in the film they talk about accelerating the electrons. That would be a synchrotron, not a cyclotron. So the actual particle we're accelerating are protons. We have a wide support base, got about $2 billion worth of infrastructure over the last 50 years invested in Triumph, and about 100 million a year annual operating support from both federal and provincial governments. So the science program that we operate is shown in this graphic, which comes from our 20-year vision. And it shows around the edge the sort of science threads that we operate in: nuclear physics, particle physics. So these are the traditional areas that Triumph has worked in. Cosmology. Nuclear astrophysics is trying to understand how reactions occur in extreme environments like supernovae. Molecular material science. We have an irradiation facility where we can mimic the upper atmosphere. So aerospace programs will come to Triumph, test their electronics. You can't shield the electronics because of the cosmic radiation, but you can check that the plane doesn't fall out of the sky if the electronics get hit. And so it's that sort of irradiation process that we provide to industry. And as you can imagine, that becomes proprietary data. And so ensuring that you're looking at how those data are managed is also an important component of what we do. In the particle physics side, we connect to the the international community, especially CERN. And I think that's an area where the globalization of data storage, data analysis has been shown to be very effective. CERN, it runs obviously a particle collider, and they create a huge amount of data. Now, the benefit there is that it's actually quite well contained in terms of the type of data that they're looking at. So simulations of collisions, and then the data that comes out from those collisions. And that's actually allowed the development of a full global infrastructure where it's a tiered structure. Data are distributed around the world in tiers, starting from CERN at tier 1, Triumph is tier 0. Triumph runs a tier 1 with Simon Fraser University, so that's the national level. And then it goes down into the institutional level in universities. So each component is thereby bringing effectively the sort of resources that it can afford. And I think that's probably a key to the way that that distributed network has been successful in terms of being able to build a truly global network to address some of those challenges. One of the other areas, I've already mentioned the connection that we have into industry, and a growing area for us is the medical isotopes. So the production of radioisotopes which are used either in diagnostics or therapy. And an example of the therapy there is the development of targeted alpha therapy using isotopes such as actinium-225. And these are alpha particles, so they're very destructive. So if you can get them to the tumor, they destroy the tumor without destroying the surrounding tissue. And the clinical trials going on right now, looking at how effective this is for things like prostate cancer that's metastasized, and this is the last-ditch attempt, and it looks to be incredibly effective. Clearly, that's an area where there's substantial money being invested by pharmaceutical companies. And I think that's part of the challenge that the data management and the data collection actually imparts again into our ecosystem. Okay, I just wanted to finish by noting that Triumph, we're located on the University of British Columbia campus, and we're on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam. And they have, for millennia, passed on their traditions, their culture, their history on that site. And we're very proud to be able to do the same and continue in that tradition at Triumph. And you can say it never rains in Vancouver. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. Thanks very much. Inma, would you like to share?
So thank you for inviting me to be here, even in the last minute. It is a pleasure to be here to show and to share with you what we are doing in Europe in relation with data sharing and computing. We are working together in Europe in two main initiatives. One is the European Open Science Cloud, and the other is the Euro High Performance Computing Joint Undertaking, on both sides of the slides. Both initiatives are rooted in the European Union vision that we need to enhance Europe's scientific and technological leadership, foster innovation, and ensure that the Europe remains competitive on the global stage in this field. Both initiatives are developed in response to the growing need for more integrated, scalable, and cutting-edge infrastructure for research and innovation in Europe. Together with this, a third element and a main pillar in all this ecosystem are the research infrastructures. In particular, the research infrastructure that are included in the European Strategy Forum for Research Infrastructure Roadmap. These infrastructures are designed and constructed in a scheme of joint collaboration between the member states, European member states, associated countries to the Union, and international partners. And we build them in a scheme of variable geometry in which each country decides in the infrastructure they want to join in relation or regard the national interest for being there, attending the needs of the research communities of each of our countries. The European Open Science Cloud concept was born on the need to facilitate open science in Europe, with the intention to making scientific research data, tools and services available, accessible, interoperable, and reusable across borders, but also across disciplines. The European Union recognized several years ago that research was increasingly relying on large volumes of data. And without having a proper infrastructure in Europe, this data will be utilized and also will bring to inefficiencies and bringing potential barriers to progress in science and technology in Europe. So the European visions with EOSC is to create a federated system, open data infrastructure for research, making the scientific knowledge more accessible and enabling collaboration across borders and disciplines. The EOSC initiative is governed in a tripartite scheme in which we sit together, European Commission, member states and associated countries, and the users and institutions that are behind the use of this data. Where we stand today, we are in the process to build this federated system. It is going to be composed by nodes, national nodes, but also thematic nodes, and that will be federated around a central node, what we call the European node, that is procured by the European Commission, and it is in this, at this moment operational. So we are in the process to start to build this federation, joining to this EOS node the capabilities of the nodes that are spread along the territory and institutions in Europe. As regards the Euro-HPC joint undertaking, this is an initiative that aims to develop and deploy, extend and maintain in the European Union a world-leading federated, secure and hyper-connected supercomputing and quantum computing services and data infrastructures ecosystem. The idea is to create a competitive supercomputing system to support innovation and research. Its mission has been recently extended, and with the inclusion of a new mandate for the Euro-HPC joint undertaking, that is to develop and operate artificial intelligence factories that are going to be located around the main nodes of this supercomputing that we have spread along the different countries in Europe. You see here the list of the supercomputing that we have already established in Europe. Both the European Open Science Cloud and the Euro-HPC joint undertaking are the two key European initiatives that are intended to play this pivotal role in advancing scientific and research and innovation development in Europe. In the middle, we have these European research infrastructures attached to ICRI that are also a main pillar, because through the research infrastructure linked with the EOSC and the Euro-HPC is the way in which we build the ecosystem of research and innovation in Europe. The integration of the research infrastructure into the broader European research ecosystem through these two initiatives enhance their value by making their data and services more accessible, interoperable, and computational powerful. So this is what we have in Europe. Of course, just to say that all the three of them, all the initiatives are open for global collaboration and international collaboration. So in all of them, we are working on the possibility to federate our resources with the other resources and other initiatives that are around the globe in order to make stronger the possibilities of the science in Europe and at global size.
Thank you. Europe in a nutshell or in 5 minutes is not easy, so thank you so much. It was a whirlwind tour of the activities. So I think you will probably agree that we've had different perspectives. So an institutional, if you like, network, the scientific perspective, the very large research infrastructure, and then the continent of Europe, or at least part of it. So we're going to move now to the panel discussion. Okay, so as I said at the beginning, we have some questions, and we wanted to look at 3 different aspects. Yes, the economies of scale, the interoperability aspect, and then the potential impact of artificial intelligence. So my first question is, and yes, you all have a microphone, and you just put your hand up and take. So with respect to the economies of scale, no, international or cross-border or cross-disciplinary cooperation and collaboration, it both supports and it augments opportunities, yeah, and investments for research infrastructures. So do you think that that's a fair statement? Would you agree with it? Nigel's shaking his head. Would you like to go first, Nigel?
Sure. Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, they work.
Yeah, I think the example that I show here is in particle physics, where clearly there has been economy of scale. There's been a well-understood structure and the ability to cascade that through various countries across, obviously, transnational borders. That has allowed that economy of scale because you are looking to basically recreate similar requirements, similar infrastructure across the globe. And that's both in terms of hardware and in terms of the talent needed to drive that hardware. I think one of the interesting things about particle physics is just the length of time it takes to develop these infrastructure. People may be aware that CERN is now talking about the Future Circular Collider, which is basically a 50 to 80 year program of work in terms of developing an accelerator program. These things are built assuming that the data management and analysis infrastructure will keep pace. As we heard this morning, they're built at a point where you can't actually analyze the data because there's too much, but there's an assumption that when the data actually arrive in 20, 30 years, you'll be in a position to be able to analyze that. So I think that the construct within particle physics lends itself very much to that ability to have that economy of scale across international borders. I think the issue is how do you translate that to other areas of science and other areas of data generally in terms of the management there.
Thanks, Nat. Leslie, did you want?
Yeah, I just totally believe in this, that there's an economy of scale of doing it internationally and moving down to long tail stuff. I was privileged to be part of the One Geology project 20 years ago, where the African countries were struggling to be able to get their map data out because all they had available was commercial software and they couldn't afford it. And so the international richer countries established a means of open source data delivery. We're also able to leave their data in their kind of standards but mapped to an international standard. Once they could do that, they could leverage all this infrastructure that the wealthier countries had been able to build, and then we were able to share geological map data from, I think in the end we got 129 countries up. So yeah, I think it is, we want to do global problems, we want to do global challenges. We still have to be able to use the data locally, but there's a hell of a lot to be gained in economies of scale by sharing.
Leo, did you want to, or?
I just wanted to add that looking at it from a standardization and interoperability point of view as well, to create a standard, you need very diverse use cases. So certainly working across borders helps improve that. And if everybody's on board from the start, interoperability becomes seamless. Yeah, so I look at it from that lens as well.
Okay.
No,
Yeah, I think it works. Try.
No, yeah, I support clearly this statement. I think that with this common approach and pooling resources between the different initiatives and different countries and different globally, we work in different ways. Once we reduce inefficiencies and cost, because we have the possibility to join efforts at the level of researchers, at the level of funding, in order to produce better science. but also we contribute to have broader data amount of data in order to tackle the global challenges that we are facing with different approaches and coming from different regions, areas, and scientific domains for that. So definitely, I think that sharing data and making them globally, I think that we are helping to this economy of scale and improving the opportunities to produce better research.
Okay, thanks, Emma. And we'll come back to that after when we get to the AI. Something will this kind of positive feeling amongst the panelists stay? But this morning, and actually in many of the other sessions that I have sat in, it was really nice to hear about the human component, and also speaking with the panelists, that the aspect of people and also skills, of course, were essential components of successful infrastructures. And so I wanted to ask you, do you feel that there's sufficient emphasis on, and funding for, of course, the human component of these infrastructures? You talked about 2 billion, for your particle accelerator. I mean, are you satisfied with the skills and people investments?
Ooh, that's put me on the spot. I think there's an interesting element here in that we operate at the interface between academia, government, and industry. And I think there are different drivers depending on the vector that you're looking at this problem from. One of the realizations of the pandemic, for instance, is that having national resilience in terms of not just infrastructure, but in terms of talent, is absolutely critical. When the pandemic hit, Canada was actually exposed because we didn't have the capability for vaccine production at the time. And I think the assumption that it would be feasible on a global scale to be able to manage that was found a little bit wanting. So I think the challenge, I think, in this space is that from an academic perspective, talent is very mobile. It's the whole point of academia is to get around the world and develop capability, develop yourself as well. I think from the government and industry side, it's a slightly different driver, because you do want to make sure that the talent is within the country, and I think that provides a little bit of tension. So in terms of ensuring there is sufficient emphasis on the funding, I think you have to try and accommodate both aspects there, and really make the case that you are developing a pipeline of talent in these sort of areas where you're both fulfilling the academic requirement, but also fulfilling the national need and the national drivers as well. But it does require additional funding.
Leslie, go on. Pick me.
I'd like to go to the other end of the scale, because this really hit me with the human component. Well, I'm a bit of a data nerd, if you haven't guessed. And we have things called repositories. And one of the things that is not emphasised or funded for is curators of that data. And I know we had one group that said, oh yeah, we can automate curation, we don't need that. And the automated thing was checking the title was, there was something in the title, something in the abstract, and we looked at the titles and it said, Pell's collection or basalts from my mum's backyard. It was just useless. And I know a couple of repositories in the US that are being questioned because they have curators. They don't do detailed curation, but they do look after the data and make it into something sensible. And they are being questioned as to why they're so much more expensive than the other repositories that don't have curators, but they have the better data. So that's a very specific example, but it's coming at our data and our data assets to be safe for the future. And I do not think there is enough emphasis on that in any funding for repositories.
Okay, so more funding for the humans in repositories. Yeah, and AI won't solve it, right?
Well, that was what these guys said, and I sort of said, if you had a look at the titles of these data sets, what the hell's in them?
Leo, did you want to intervene and then?
Yeah, I think one area what I wanted to highlight is that funding is often project-driven, and that's very good for innovation, but projects have to be delivered within certain constraints. So when it comes to human capacity development, I think you need flexibilities around, and sometimes often short-term to medium-term projects, it doesn't really help that much, but with long-term investments, yeah, obviously there is scope for it.
Inma.
No, I wanted just to add that we have to also to establish the wording systems for these new people that we need for managing data, because we are in a context of researchers, and not always it is well recognized, and we cannot offer them professional career if they move from the research to this other part that is more related to services, to data stewardship. So I think that we have to do the effort. In one side, we have to have the possibility to mobilize at the university level grades, masters, and everything in relation to the promotion of these professionals that are needed. But also afterwards, when we have them trained and formed, to have the possibility to offer them professional careers.
Yeah, so the famous advancing research assessment. So we'll plug it now while we're talking about it. There's a coalition on advancing research assessment, or otherwise known as COARA, and the concept is just that, right? Rewards and recognition around all of the, if you like, the people involved in the whole ecosystem. So thank you for raising that, Inma. That's good. I'm going to move on now, because this morning we heard about, when we talk about interoperability, yes, and that would be the I in FAIR. So FAIR, as we heard, is, as you know, I hope, is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. But we also heard about the CARE principles, if you were in the Indigenous plenary session this morning. And CARE, as you can see on the screen, stands for Collective Benefits, Authority to Control, the Responsibility and the Ethics. And it was the Global Indigenous Data Alliance and some of, I see, friends in the front row who came up with these CARE principles. And in fact, in the Research Data Alliance, we always say be fair and care, which is their motto. And while you hear the CARE principles being talked about with respect to Indigenous data, Indigenous knowledge, we actually advocate in the Research Data Alliance for the CARE principles to go hand in hand with CARE, so with FAIR. And I'm assured that there will be a CARE data maturity model coming, like there is a FAIR data maturity model coming soon. But anyway, having talked about those, so we have these two sets of principles. They're more or less embraced by, collectively. So wouldn't we just implement them? Yeah, we just get standards. We could implement FAIR and CARE, and that would be the problem solved. Right, Leslie?
Off with your head.
The lover of standards.
I'm going to get myself into an awful lot of trouble here. If I do, it's unintentional. I agree with what you're saying with the FAIR principles, because if you read the paper, they are designed for machine actionability of data. There's nothing human in them at all. The only human aspect of them is how it's easy to get the people doing big data to use them, because the data, if it's machine readable, it works a lot better. For the long tail, it's impossible. They won't change. When you go to the CARE principles, the human side is embedded in the CARE principles. So it's not as nuts and boltsy as what the FAIR principles are, if I can use that term, Maui. And it does take in ethics. It takes in things that are very, very hard. They're qualitative, and you can't kind of put them into something nuts and bolts that translates. But having said that, there is a good paper in Nature saying if you want to make your data CARE compliant, first make it fair. I mean, you have to be able to find the data before you can make it CARE, right? Okay, we're getting there. But I think we can have some sensible conversations between, I'm going to call the data infrastructure people that build the nuts and bolts for where you put this stuff. Like, for example, the Indigenous people are working on an ICRI standard for provenance. Well, I guarantee the content is going to be different to what I do for chemistry provenance, but how I actually attach that to the data and trace it back through, it's going to be the same. So you've got to be really, really sensitive. And again, I emphasise that a fair bit of the care principles are about ethics, are about human relationships, negotiations with traditional owners. They're not things that you can quantify as easily as you can the FAIR principles. Did I put my foot in it?
You know, they often also say FAIR, fully AI ready. I don't know if we want to go to that one, but
I'm sorry, you're out of touch. It's now science ready.
Oh right, sorry, science ready.
It's got to be fair ready and science ready.
Okay, we still have a couple of questions to go, but I did want to hear, Irma, do you want to say anything about the FAIR and the CARE, or you're happy to?
I think that they are extremely good foundations, but we have challenges ahead, and it's not enough just to think in implementing the principle. We have to put in place means and resources in order to spread what this means. It's not, we don't end in the application of the FAIR and CARE principles.
Okay. I'm going to move on. Is that okay? Because there are 2 questions left, but I'd like to go to the last of the 2, if you don't mind, and then there might be a question from the audience, and then I'm going to let you close up, because they're very on time. I live in Italy, and we have a 15-minute window, but not in Australia. Yeah, so we have to finish up. But when we were talking with artificial intelligence, so the availability and the lack of resources, competencies, and could create a divide across the globe, and we heard a little bit how that was overcome in with examples at the beginning. But it could create a 2-tier system, right, with the haves and the have-nots. And those, the haves, because they have the resources and the things, are the ones that will define the processes, the protocols, the standards, whatever. And then the have-nots, if I could use those terms, will just have to take them on board. Yeah, and that's life. So, within the context of research infrastructures and the perspectives that you come from, what can you tell us some of the urgent things that we need to do, or the things we need to bear in mind now, so that these sort of situations don't happen? And I'm going to start with you, Leo, down the end, and move along the panel up the top like this.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, the biggest thing would be inclusivity, because we know that AI is only as good as the quality of the data that comes through, right? Mm-hmm. So I think from the start, research infrastructures, we have to approach it in an inclusive manner, include everybody in training these models. And secondly, I think ethical considerations are a big thing. So certainly around regulations and legal frameworks, there's still some work to do there. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think from my point of view, that would be.
Thanks.
I'll also continue with inclusivity. If you want to avoid that divide, the greatest thing you can do is democratise conferences and participation in standards building. There weren't many good things that came out of COVID, but one of them was we switched to online conferences, and the participation from a lot of this Global South really went up. And it's disappointing to see now that a lot of the conferences are stopping a virtual component, as are some of the standards groups. We have to crack that, because we cannot develop global standards if we're leaving out more than half of the world's population, because it means that the wealthier countries, or the groups that can afford the money to go to these standards body and participate in them, to me, are what's starting to create this divide.
Mm. Yeah, and I would agree. We have a policy, and we do events every 6 months, and they're hybrid, they're expensive. It's like running 2 conferences. But if we want to be an inclusive global organisation, you have to do that. And you don't do it based on the fact that 500 people will turn up. You do it, it's like access for, diversely abled people. You just need one, so you must make it accessible to all. But it is, unfortunately, many are pulling back on because of the cost.
And if there's any funders from Australia, it's getting really bad because Australians are not now participating because they can't get the travel funds.
Well, that's another challenge, yeah.
That's just another challenge, and I'm just saying we need to look at who is developing these standards because I think they're starting inadvertently to create your divide.
Nigel?
Not sure I have a lot to offer on this one, but the area of AI that we're putting a lot of effort into at the moment is around sustainability and the use of the accelerators, and basically tuning up the way that we operate the machines. And I think in that sort of environment, it is very straightforward to look at how you can distribute those sort of results around other accelerator complexes around the world. And so I would view this as part of the role that we have to play to ensure that we're working within the community of the research infrastructures and basically sharing best practice across the labs.
Thanks. Inma?
I don't know many more to say. I think that we have to take care because not having access to these resources is going to bring to the divide, and this is something that we have to avoid. The access to the artificial intelligence resources need to be broadly available in order to avoid these problems. I think that it's very important to include the human perspective in the development of artificial intelligence, all the ethical aspect that needs to be taken into consideration, to converse that the artificial intelligence is helping us to produce better research and not is going to fight against us for another thing.
Very true. Thank you so much. Right, I think we have time for one question before I close it up. Would anybody, hand up here in the, you need a microphone though, because I think there are people following us online, hence the microphones. Could you tell us who you are? And
yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
yeah.
Yeah, I'm Adam McLeod. I'm AquaWatch Program Manager, CSRO. The talk included reference to interoperability, data curation, fairness and openness. And these are the interfaces of our research infrastructure system. But these systems don't come online in a binary way. And I guess my question is managing the quality of data that's coming out of them as well, especially when it's a system which is in its embryonic stages or something that's developed iteratively or in an evolutionary way. So managing quality, or how you balance providing access to that early data versus withholding it or putting lots of caveats on it.
Leo, do you want to?
I'll start, maybe Leslie will add. I think with regards to data quality, if you're approaching it from a infrastructure management point of view, the main thing to focus on is quality metadata. Because when you get to the data set level, I think quality is also subjective to the extent of like a data is fit for one purpose but not for the next. Could be resolution related or any other thing. But I think focusing on high quality metadata first and standardization would be the way to go.
Quality, again, comes back to curation. The other thing too is I did work with a group trying to set international standards for quality, and we gave up. And we basically said it's in the beholder, it's the person who's generating the data set, publishes the quality tests they did on that set, what their quality specifications were, and how they benchmarked against that specification. And if that specification turns out to be something that's international and they do publish what they did, then you're starting to get globalisation of all your quality. But again, you can't do that without a human investment, and in most data systems, we don't have it to do it.
Thank you. Right, I'm going, before I ask you to give your closing statement, because, you know, I think you can probably tell from the discussion that we haven't been able to deep dive into any of the many challenges around the data. But if you are interested, next year, you can come to International Data Week, and we're having it here in Brisbane. And International Data Week is kindly hosted by the Australian Research Data Commons, but it is it's an event that is organised by the International Science Council Committee on Data, CODATA, the World Data System, and the Research Data Alliance. So you get 2 conferences, SciDataCon, organised by WDS and CODATA, and the RDA plenary in one 4-day event. Apparently the week after we will be enjoying eResearch Australasia, or Australasia, right? Got it right. Here as well. So it's 2 weeks of packed data discussions, a wonderful community from all those organisations. So you're encouraged to come and continue the conversations there. But so now, while I leave the kangaroo on the screen, I would like to ask my panellists, starting maybe with Inma, just to leave us with one thought around the whole. So we're scaling data and the whole challenges around data.
Well, what I can say is that the global partnership, data sharing in this global context, and the use of our research infrastructure, that are the main element that we have for produce excellent science, is an extraordinary way to globally build the best research to tackle the global challenges that we have ahead.
Yeah, I think there are examples that we've been discussing which demonstrate that if there is a will, then it is indeed possible to globalize data and turn that data into information and research and collectively.
Thank
I'm a scientist. Content is king. There are a lot of expensive research infrastructures where the scientific content is rubbish. There are a lot of scientific systems which would frustrate the hell out of you if you tried to use them. But the queen that goes with content is ethics, and make sure that you've got the ethics of where you collected that sample, that it respects local owners. But more importantly, as you start to apply AI to it, also there's ethics in AI.
Thanks, Liz. And the last word goes to you, Leo.
Yeah, so for me, it's really around something we haven't touched on is the sustainability and trust around data management practices. So I think working with certified repositories could be a start to trying to build up a trustworthy framework for data management.
Okay. And with that, I say thank you to the audience, to my wonderful panel, earlier and late arrivals. I'm very grateful to you. And I invite you to go and have your afternoon tea.